Hi everybody, it's Jessica from Chambray Blues. I'm back. We are going to finish assembling our quilt squares for the Spinning Wheels quilt. This quilt is a kit by Riley, Blake, and Cricket. It's the Daisy Days throw quilt that I'm making, and the pattern is this one here called Spinning Wheels. And we've been talking about how to assemble the squares. I've done step-by-step tutorials all week long, and now we're ready to put those squares together into the quilt. So as you can see, I've got the quilt top started here. It's really a beautiful color combination, and it's not super huge, so it doesn't take forever to put together. So far I've got 3 rows started, and I'm going to show you how to go about doing that. So you're going to want to lay it out so you can see your pattern. And I'm just going by the pattern on the kit illustration. So I've already done the 3 rows, so my next row is the 4th one here. If you count the blocks down, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the row that I'm working on at this time. So the first square is the dark blue combination, and I have all my squares here ready to go. So I'm going to lay them out in order. So you can see them. This is the first one. That's the dark blue. The next square is the green and white print. That's this one here. Okay. And we're just going to go down the row and sew them together 2 at a time. So I'm going to start with these 2, and I'm laying them out as I go so that I make sure and get the pieces in the right place. It's really easy on a larger quilt to get everything mixed up, but once you have a process for doing it, it's so easy to do it and to get it right. So I'm going to start with these 2 pieces. I'm going to fold one over the other so I know which seam I'm sewing. I'm sewing this seam right here, and I don't want to get it mixed up. I'm going to line up all of my seams in this quilt pattern. It's really important that each seam join with the one on the other side. So I can feel it with my fingers that they're lined up. You can use pins, although I don't recommend it. You can use pins to hold it in place. A preferred method would be a piece of tape. So I came across this product. It's called Steam a Seam, and it's narrow tape that's sticky that you can put between your pieces to kind of glue them together so they don't move on you when you sew them. So you can use that. I would just put a little piece in there like so, and you'd have to iron it. It's the heat that makes it stick, and then sew the rest of the seam. Maybe do one at each end. But for my tutorial, I'm just going to show you how I do it without. Okay, so I'm ready to sew. I'm going to put these underneath my Kessler foot. I'm using a stitch length of 2.4 and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I have the pieces joined up tightly. I can feel it underneath that they're right where they should be. I'm going to start sewing. You do not need to back tack in quilting because you will have other seams that will cross over this and that will anchor the seam. So you don't need to go backwards. But as I sew, I turn my pieces back and look and make sure that they're lined up where they're supposed to be. And I can feel it with my fingers. So I'm going to kind of hold it in place while I stitch. Okay, and then I'm going to do the next one down here. Make sure it's right where I want it to go. And stitch right off the piece and just cut the threads. No, it's not cutting. All right, so there we have the first 2 pieces of this row sewn together. You can see the seams are matched. Now we're going to go on to the next piece. So if I go back to my pattern, the next piece in the row is a pink and white square. So I'm going to pull that out of my pile of squares here. There we go. And we're going to sew this seam next. So I'm going to do the same process. I'm folding it over, lining it up. Make sure that I've got all the seams lined up exactly where I want them before putting it under the machine. And then I'm going to stitch. Ah, my thread broke. Technical difficulty. It happens, especially when you're in a hurry. All right, so this is my bobbin thread that broke for some reason. No, it wasn't either, it was the top. All right. This machine has a needle threader, I just never use it. Okay. There's still something not white. Okay, here we go. All right, sometimes you have to rethread. Okay, back to my piece here. Back under the machine. I'm going over my first row stitching, so there's no reason to back tack again. Matching up the seams as I stitch. Sewing right off the piece, and then trim my threads, and there's the next piece. So there's only 5 pieces across here, so we're going to go on to the next one. Is the gray piece in the pattern. You can see as we're doing this, it's going to make a diagonal design with each square. So here's my gray piece. By the way, if you haven't squared up your pieces and trimmed them, you might want to do that before stitching them together. Sometimes they can be off just a little bit after you put them together. But this gray piece is next. Make sure my pattern is going to go together. Turn it over and then stitch. Now, if the piece is a little bit off, I pull either the top or the bottom with my fingers as I'm sewing so that it meets where I want it to. Okay, there's the gray one. There we go. And go back to our pattern. The last piece in the row is the green floral. which I should have here someplace. There it is. Okay. So here's my last piece in the row, and I will have all 5 across. Once again, I'm matching it up from the right side. I'm going to turn it over, put those right sides together, match the seams, and then stitch it. Okay, there it is. So that's the whole row. So once you have gotten that far, then we are going to assemble the rows onto the overall piece. And it's a very similar process. So the main thing is you want to make sure that your design is complete. So you can see here I have the pieces in a diagonal format. So the gray appears right down the middle of the quilt in the diagonal. If I move it over a bit, you can see the pink is the next block over. So in similar fashion, we're going to start at the end here. This next row has the blue square. According to my diagram, I am now doing the row with the blue. So I'm going to turn it like so and match up those pieces all the way down the entire row. Well, this one you might need some pins in because this is a longer piece to match. So I would go ahead and pin at every beginning of each square. Pin those seams together so that you know that they are going to match. So right down the piece. One other thing I should mention is that all of my pieces have been starched. After I finished stitching the blocks together, the small blocks, the pieces were pressed and lightly starched, and that makes it much easier to put everything together as if they're a little bit starched. Okay, so we're going to go all the way down to the end. There we go. So that'll be our last piece. So now I'm going to stitch that, starting at the first row. You can see this piece I did not trim. You can see there's about a 1/4 inch difference right there. So I have my own methods. I just know that I have to not include that when I'm sewing, but it is easier if you square up each block before you go through the assembly process. Okay, so here we go. We're going to stitch it together, make sure each seam is matched with the one on the other side. This is why I prefer not to use pins, so that I have 2 hands to manipulate the fabric where it needs to go. Pulling underneath or from the top, make sure that it's where it's supposed to be. And I never recommend sewing across a pin. You should remove your pin when you get close to that seam so you don't sew across it. It breaks needles, it ruins machines, it's not worth it. You can trim your threads later. I always trim all mine at the end. Okay, there we go. For the heavier seams, I find that if I stitch with a hand behind the presser foot and one in front of it, that I can pull it evenly under the foot. Okay, we're just about there. All right, all the way to the end. Okay, and that is our next row. See how it works with that pattern at a diagonal? The pieces are all matched, and I will go back and finish the last couple of rows and then press it before we add the borders. So this pattern has 2 additional borders on the quilt top, and we'll be doing those in my next tutorial. So thanks for watching. You can find more tutorials at my website, chambryblues.com. Have a great day.